There we go.
All right, good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Cayer. I'm the mayor of Lewiston, and I really appreciate folks attending this press conference. This is a big deal for our city, so we wanted to share it in this fashion. Also, there's lots happening in Augusta that we believe directly impacts communities throughout the state, from Presque Isle to Kittery. So I'm going to take an opportunity as mayor to speak about that as well. I have served Lewiston as an elected official for a decade now, and during that decade, it has been some of the most challenging time in Lewiston's history. During my first term in office, we were thrust into a great recession with little warning. Its effects were immediate and long-lasting. The collapse of the housing bubble here in Lewiston was so dramatic that we saw many absentee landlords walk away from their buildings, leaving tenants to fend for themselves. We were forced to remove dozens of unsafe multifamily housing units. The recession also brought about a dramatic reduction in private sector investment here in Lewiston. When all was said and done, we had experienced significant layoffs, reductions in longtime city service levels, and reduced local education funding to a minimum required just to receive the full state funding. While many affluent communities quickly recovered, Lewiston was not so fortunate. No sooner had we begun to recover from the recession, the pandemic struck. Again, kind of suddenly and without opportunity to prepare. This added great stresses to our local institutions. As the pandemic receded, we have recently seen some small but positive steps in our recovery. Private sector investments in job and housing are coming back to Lewiston. We are seeing young entrepreneurs emerging. Our art scene is ramping up again. Specialty, locally owned restaurants are expanding, and our largest employers are again investing in our community. Our chief assessor and finance director recently announced that the New England Clean Energy Connect project, which has gained approval from many state and federal regulatory agencies, has begun to invest in improving Maine's position on the New England energy grid, and has already invested significantly here in Lewiston. With $100 million invested in the power grid in Lewiston alone, that assessed value will make significant differences in our community. With today's news, and due to, in large part to the New England Clean Energy Connect corridor, Lewiston is turning a corner. The City Council and School Committee will have the opportunity to work together to restore some needed municipal services and education funding. And we can do this while providing meaningful tax relief to our residents. As mayor, I will advocate for allocating these revenues equally to three specific areas: reinvesting in our city services and departments, reinvesting in education of our children, and then also providing the community meaningful tax relief. We can all do this through supporting a project that will reduce fossil fuel use. The scientific facts are clear. Reducing carbon emissions through investing in things like electric cars and heat pumps require expanding the use of hydro and solar power and providing the transmission grid needed to deliver that power. If we're going to leave our children a better place, we must reduce reliance on carbon-based energy and to shift to cleaner and safer sources. And the NIC project does this. As many of you know, I'm a working Joe who chooses to give back to our community through public service. Like many in our community, I live paycheck to paycheck. Both the NIC and Central Maine Power have and promise to continue to provide our community with wages to thrive, not simply to survive. CMP has given many small businesses a boost to their bottom line during a time of uncertainty. I urge all Mainers to recognize this as we decide on our future carbon dependence. I would now like to turn this over to some key staff members. Here today is our School Committee Chair, Megan Parks, our Chief Assessor, Bill Healey, and our Finance Director, Heather Hunter. And with that, I'd like to turn this over to our Chief Assessor. I'm going to have some final thoughts on LD 1708, and staff and I will take questions after that. Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Boy, it's a rare occurrence when an assessor gets to deliver good news at a press conference. You can't overstate the significance of the valuation increase from the Clean Energy Connect project that enabled us to reduce the tax rate for fiscal year 22. It's the largest taxable valuation increase in Lewiston since 2006 when the Walmart Distribution Center came online. The distribution center added $72 million. This year alone, the Clean Energy Connect is $100 million, with an anticipated $200 million over the next couple of years. It's the largest taxable valuation increase I've witnessed in my 25 years in the assessing profession. We were aware that construction was going on at the site off Main Street. I had no idea it was in the range of $100 million. Actually, when I received the declaration of value from the NECEC, I made a phone call to one of the representatives to say, you didn't add an extra zero or anything by chance, right? And they verified the accuracy. And of course, that's when I felt comfortable sharing it with administration. To put the increase in perspective, the assessing department typically picks up between $10 and $20 million in new value annually from building permits, new construction, and property reviews. We process approximately 3,000 real estate and personal property accounts, but the average increase is only about $5,000. So to get a single property increase of $100 million is astronomical. We're so happy to be able to give some benefit to the taxpayers. With that, I'll turn it over to Finance Director Heather Hunter.
Thank you, Bill. Good morning. I would like to reiterate the Mayor and Bill's sentiments and comments that this $111 million valuation increase is a tremendous benefit to our city and the Lewiston taxpayers, especially coming out of a pandemic. The City Council and the School Committee should be commended for all of their hard work during the budget process, bringing a proposed tax rate from $30.93 down to $29.67. This historic-setting valuation increase not only eliminated the dollar increase, it shrank it another 41 cents below the current rate, for a new mill rate of $28.26. This is the second fiscal year in a row the City Council has reduced the tax rate for the City of Lewiston taxpayers. Using an average home of $200,000 in today's market, the owner would have paid $179.75. Now they are saving $74 from what they paid this current year. I would be remiss not to recognize the City Council, the Lewiston School Committee, our City Administrator, our Deputy City Administrator, and the School Superintendent for their leadership and hard work during this past year. Thank you. I will now introduce Megan Parks, the Lewiston School Superintendent, our School Committee Chairperson, excuse me.
Thank you. I'm going to read my own brief statement, and then I have a statement from the superintendent who is out currently recovering from surgery. I first want to acknowledge the fact that the Clean Energy Corridor has both supporters and opponents here in Lewiston, but that's a debate for another day. Today, we need to focus on the positive impact that this $111 million will have on our students, our schools, and our community as a whole. The school committee recently wrapped up a tenuous budget season that resulted in a district budget that struggled to meet the ever-growing needs of our students. The focus of our committee during this budget process was to best meet these student needs while also respecting the financial situation in our community and keeping any tax increase to a minimum. To this end, cuts and reallocations were made that were hard for many committee members to accept. Temporary COVID relief funds were used for essential expenses, creating concerns for a potential financial cliff in the next couple of years. The burden of a financial drop-off such as this would likely fall on the taxpayers in the form of further tax increases. District planning to prevent this cliff has already begun, but the portion of these funds coming into our school district will not only greatly reduce the likelihood of a financial drop-off and related tax increases, but it will also aid in creating an equitable environment within our schools, restoring programming and services to our most vulnerable students, supporting mandated and much-needed teacher salary increases, and improving our educational offerings district-wide. Regardless of anyone's opinion on the Clean Energy Corridor, from an educational standpoint, The impact these additional funds are going to have is a huge blessing and benefit to our city and our schools. Thank you, Mayor Cayer, Bill Healey, Heather Hunter, and all of our local leaders who have been involved in bringing this tax relief to our city. And Superintendent Langlis's statement. I wish I could be with you all in person today to recognize the evidence that is showing what we have been seeing over the last decade or so. Lewiston is on the rise. I want to thank Mayor Cayer, city staff, and city officials for their ongoing work and commitment to stay the course. The course of fiscal responsibility, the course of economic growth, the course of commitment to our youth, the course of excellence through equity, and staying the course to enrich the already rich fabric of our city. I am proud to work with and for the city of Lewiston. It is where my wife and I built our home and are raising our children, and even though we have only been here for 20 years, Lewiston is home. The work of municipal budgets is hard. It is full of impossible decisions that must be made. In those decisions, you find the fabric of a community. In today's news about valuation, an anticipated reduction in local tax burden due to educational funding models, commitment to fiscal responsibility, proven commitment to education, and strength in community, I look to Mayor Cayer to give a sincere thank you for his leadership and collaboration. Today's announcement may be good news, but it comes on the heels of many pieces of good news over the past couple of years, and there is more good news on the horizon. Lastly, from the education side of the conversation, as always, go Blue. And I will turn it back over to Mayor Cayer.
So we heard a couple of times so far in this press conference acknowledgement of the Lewiston School Committee and the Lewiston City Council. I've worked with many councils over the years, and I've worked with several school committees, and this group of elected officials, really hard workers. We have our differences, and occasionally public officials clash a little bit. But in the end, every single elected official here in Lewiston, the City Council and the School Committee, come to work every day in the best interest of our city. So I really want to acknowledge that. So during our press release announcing this press conference, which for me is kind of confusing, but I made it a point to state that I wanted to share some thoughts on what I perceive as a storm looming over the entire state. And the risk to municipalities is great. Let me be upfront, though, with you and this community. Central Maine Power has served our community and our state better in areas like customer service. Hold on a second, let me just restate that. Central Maine Power could have served, there we go, I apologize. Central Maine Power could have served our community and our state better in areas like customer service and its billing practices. I also believe it could have done a much better job helping Maine residents and ratepayers understand the reliability issues that it faces in transmitting energy to our homes and businesses. My support of Central Maine Power doesn't negate my belief, like any regulated utility, that we must hold CMP's feet to the fire. Like any business, municipal government, or state government, we all stumble occasionally. CMP's response to these recent issues have convinced me that they are addressing the concerns of not only the governor's office, the legislature, but most importantly, the Maine people. Central Maine Power and Versant have served our state for many years. They have supported many community causes. They employ many of our neighbors and provide good wages and benefits to its employees. This is why employee unions have spoken out against LD 1708. Some sponsors of this bill would have you believe that this is not a government takeover of private sector companies. It's only a shift to consumer ownership. We can put as much lipstick on LD 1708 as we want, but when the legislative body takes control of companies' assets by eminent domain and turns it over to a nonprofit that is governed by elected officials, there isn't enough lipstick in the world that would make it look like anything but a government takeover. Many mayors who serve at the local level closest to the people see this for exactly what it is, a government takeover that will risk higher property taxes year after year, and we'll never know when it's going to hit us. And like the recession in Lewiston, when the state took back revenue sharing, it hit us at the absolute worst time that it could have. Let us also be clear that the legislature is not considering creating a local mandate, like when it stripped the ability of municipal governments to tax business equipment. The state forced that mandate on local governments while only refunding cities and towns 50% of that lost revenue. The rest shifted to the local property taxpayers. But they're not calling this a local mandate, so there'll be no benefit to any community should our property taxes be reduced. While LD 1708 purports to guarantee replacing the property taxes paid by these private utilities with an in lieu of tax payment, there is no absolute guarantee that these payments will be made or the requirement changed or rescinded. Maine's towns and cities have learned from hard-won experiences that what the state promises, it can also take away. The historical proof is there, and we as community members need to look into that and understand that they have a proven track record here. When faced with budget problems, the state has routinely balanced its books on the backs of local property taxpayers. The lack of an unbreakable guarantee that these revenues will continue can also affect a community's bond ratings by reducing its total assessed value, an important measure that rating agencies consider when setting a bond rating. If this results in lower ratings, those municipalities will pay a much higher borrowing cost, or will have a much higher borrowing cost. Although I have no doubt the sponsors of LD 1708 believe that the bill will produce benefits, there is no guarantee that it will. I believe that, at best, it is misguided, and at worst, it could be disastrous for those who depend upon our current private companies to provide power and to pay property taxes. So that's the conclusion of my comments. If anyone has any questions, I recognize we have many members of the media watching this on live stream, and they don't get to ask questions. But if anyone present today has any, please shoot.
Has the Lewiston budget been set yet?
It has, and I'll turn that over. Yeah.
And then, how did you go about deciding a low valuation versus the active spending? You used some of the money, I think, on the schools, I think you were talking about.
So, you know, I'll let our finance director just kind of bring us to that point. And then, you know, following advice of our finance director, I think the council agreed that at this point, reduce taxes and prepare for next year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To answer your question regarding the budget was previously adopted. The referendum for the school warrant articles were approved. So at this point, it is just the mathematical calculation in using the assessed rate or assessments divided by what's needed in the tax levy to produce a tax rate. So the budget was completely approved at that point in time when this mathematical and this chief assessor tallied all of the ins and outs and additions and came up with the final valuation number. And the current FY22 budget is on the city's website as well, the final adopted one.
So that added back, did you say it was $100 million valuation?
That's
on top of what it already was, or?
the 111 million is the net new valuation.
From just the CMP quarter or
All.
all? Yeah.
It takes into consideration any reductions plus the CMP quarter.
The CMP quarter being the biggest piece of chunk.
Yes.
All right, anything else? So once again, we really appreciate you folks taking the time to come on down here and travel safely in your departure. Thanks.